powers that be keep us from knowledge that is empowering. They like to keep us from knowledge that allows us to do more than incarnate in a cyclic pattern over and over and over. It's possible to do a great deal more than that. This is a personal hero of mine, Sir Lawrence Gardner. He was one of the few people in the world ever to be knighted for being a great historian. And you can see his credentials take up most of that first paragraph. But he made his name in England for studying a phenomenon called the Shining Ones, which is essentially humans or civilizations that learn to take in sunlight to evolve out of physical matter. He found that in historical records, the Aztecs, Mayans, Egyptians, Babylonians, and other cultures were able to do this through some very sophisticated techniques, learning some things that we only recently became aware of as a scientific culture. Only the most evolutionarily advanced cultures have even learned a hint of what we're going to talk about today. Gardner reported that in almost every instance in these cultures, they took in a special substance that enabled them to trap cosmic energy, energy from the sun, energy from the universe, in the body. And this was a secret. Only a special few were allowed to even learn what this secret was able to do for people. That using these substances in conjunction with certain meditation techniques allowed you to store energy in the body. We know from our research that the human body can store a tremendous amount of energy. Our nerves act like wires or capacitors for storing tremendous amount of electricity. If you can tap into some of that potential, there's growth there, there's evolution there, there's power there. And a lot of cultures learned this and knew this. In ancient Israel, it was called manna. In ancient India, it was called soma. In Egypt, it was called mufkusti. In Europe, it was called the Red Lion. There was a beautiful book written in the late 1940s called The Red Lion that chronicled someone's use of this substance. It was a true story. It's out of print now, but I think you can find some old copies on Amazon. And in modern times, we call it the white powder of gold. But a lot of people represent production of the white powder of gold, and they're not really giving you the white powder of gold. Sometimes it's sea salt. Sometimes it's dust. Sometimes it's just white dirt. So we'll talk about what actually you need to do to be able to take in sunlight safely. Bless you. When this substance is taken in with certain solar rituals, it's said that even people who are uninitiated into this higher knowledge feel its effects. And as we said earlier, the effects have been reserved for people who are in elite and noble classes. And the substance is said to have protective properties on the body, which means that it protects the user against the effects of sunlight. And as we said yesterday, the sun is changing. It's becoming hostile. It's putting out more X-ray and UV radiation than it has any other time in the last 1,000 years. We have mutations that are occurring in our world that we can't explain. We have mass species extinctions that are occurring. We have increased suicide in humans. We have increased suicide in animals, for that matter, particularly in whales, certain dolphins, certain other species. This is a slide that takes a picture from a stele or a monument in the Temple of Hathor. And it shows, in this part, this is a priest giving this particular, or priestess, giving this particular substance to one of the emperors. The priest creates the substance. It's administered by the goddess Hathor to the priest. This substance was said to bridge the barrier between what it meant to be a god and what it meant to be human. And that only the pharaoh and the elite upper class of Egypt were allowed to even know that it existed. When they took this substance, their lifespan increased, they developed paranormal powers, and they were able to take in light from the sun to do fantastic miracles. Historical records show that this substance contained platinum, iridium, rhodium, gold, and ruthenium. Now, we only recently discovered rhodium and ruthenium and iridium. But in every formulation that you find for this ancient substance, you find these materials over and over and over in the ancient pyramids. One might ask, how did they know about this stuff? These materials are exceptionally difficult to refine. They occur in about 1 part in 10,000 up to 1 part in 100 million in normal soil. So how did they even know it was there? How did they purify it? How did they create it in such a way that it was in a purified state in these formulas? They also found that in some cases these materials occur in 1 part per billion in the earth. Where did they get it from? How did it come to be such a common formulation in such a rare element? Now, oddly enough, platinum group elements are very strange when it comes to the nervous system. The human brain is 5% rhodium and iridium. Most people don't know that. So if you dry out a human brain weighs 3 pounds on the average. 5% of that 3 pounds is going to be rare earth elements. We use now platinum group elements to kill tumors in the body because it has the capacity to change DNA. DNA mutates under normal aging circumstances. Platinum protects against mutation. It also changes DNA in such a way that it makes DNA regress the age of the body so that the body functions in a much earlier state, a much healthier state. It helps cells communicate more effectively. Cells repair themselves more easily. Another way to look at aging is that when a body ages, it just can't fix itself. Errors creep into the organs. Your joints don't work. Your vision doesn't work. Digestion doesn't work. All those things that we're associated with of getting older. Platinum group elements not only stop that, they help reverse it. Also, the electrical impulses in the body speed up 10,000 times faster than normal when you reach a certain level of certain of these platinum group elements. Oddly enough, we use these elements in cell phones, in televisions, in satellites. We use them every day in the same way that the brain uses them as superconductors. Now, something very unusual happens when you put gold or platinum group elements in a solution of human DNA. It preferentially binds to DNA. This is a normal DNA molecule, and this is a gold molecule, but you could substitute any of the platinum group elements in there. This is normal gold, and this is when you add DNA into that solution. DNA lights up like a Christmas tree. DNA absorbs light preferentially when you add gold to the solution. When scientists first discovered this, they didn't believe it. But now, this is used in a test for cancer. Because when you tag gold and you inject it into a body, the areas of cancer light up like a Christmas tree. So you can use that as a marker test for the presence. We used to use gallium for that. It used to be called the dreaded gallium scan, but gold is a lot more inert in that sense. Gallium is radioactive. But another interesting thing is that gold and DNA have a sort of symmetrical relationship. It lines up so that the gold molecule acts like a little star. So that when you look under a microscope, the DNA molecule makes this radial arrangement around the gold molecule, almost as though they have this intelligent relationship. But I thought this was neat that you can see that whenever light strikes this combination, it makes the cell glow. Another really interesting thing that happens is when you add ruthenium, 1 atom of ruthenium added to a cell makes the cell transmit electricity and communication energy 10,000 times faster than it would normally. And this was reported in Scientific American in 1995, page 33 and 34. It means that whenever you add this rare element to DNA, it makes the cell glow. And it makes the cell act like a supercomputer. It turns something on inside of the cell. So scientifically, we have information that shows that the cell uses superconductive elements, uses platinum group elements in a way that we could not have predicted. That ancient people knew something about the cell that we're just discovering. This was just discovered and reported in 1995. But that monument is over 2,800 years old. So the ancients really aren't so primitive when you look at some of the things that they understood that we're just now starting to catch up with. Another way to look at this electric gene study is that DNA acts like a wire. DNA can hold electricity. It can hold energy. It not only holds information about the color of our eyes, the color of our hair, the color of our skin, but it also holds information about energy. That energy is dormant until something happens to make the DNA cell or the DNA molecule or DNA double helix take in more energy and begin to use it. Platinum group elements are superconductors. In the brain, they're the reason that our memories can do what they can do. Human beings can remember everything that we ever see or do. The average human's brain is bigger than the capacity of any supercomputer out there, even though supercomputers now are beating us at chess. They still don't have the memory capacity or the associative capacity of the average human brain because of these elements. In order to ingest primordial energy from the sun, the body needs these elements. If you just look at the sun without these elements, the energy starts to build up in a disorderly fashion, and it can cause some problems. Headaches being the first and foremost. Difficulty with vision. It can cause difficulty with sleep. In general, the most common side effect I've seen is just makes you nervous. Because when you look at the sun, you do take in some of that energy, but the body doesn't know what to do with it. It doesn't know how to store it. Its capacity hasn't been increased in the right way. So there is a right way to take in this extra energy. And what we're going to talk about now used to be reserved just for priests and nobility in many different cultures. Once this energy goes into the cell becomes charged with solar energy. Now, most of the DNA in a cell is dormant. More than 90 to 97% of the DNA in a cell just sits there. Doesn't do anything. When I took genetics in college and in medical school, we were taught that those cells cause cancer, or that part of the DNA caused cancer. And if you woke it up, they were called oncogenes, and it's best to keep them silent. That was in 1981. We've changed in our understanding a bit of what silent DNA is. We understand it a bit better now. But we also understand that it takes energy to wake that part of the cell up. The hidden parts of the DNA, when they wake up, they make proteins that scientists don't understand how they work or what they do. What we also understand is that in order to help wake these cells up, the rare earth elements aren't enough. Certain sounds are required to activate the energy in the cell. The sound and the sunlight work together. When you use them together, you get very predictable changes in the body. It elevates consciousness, and the body's energy or capacity to absorb this radiation increases. One of the ancient prayers that was used for this particular purpose by Kabbalists is called the miracle prayer, and it's one of the prayers that I use quite a lot. And we're going to talk about what that is. It's not just a prayer that you say in a synagogue or in a church. It has a hidden use and a meaning. This used to be reserved only for ancient priests and the temple leaders. The people in the congregation were taught the prayer as a form of worship. The priests were taught it as a form of evolutionary science. Same prayer, but they weren't taught the hidden use of it. The Lord's Prayer has the same use. It has a use as a prayer, but it also has a hidden use to help evolve consciousness. The names of God were incorporated in many prayers and in many forms of worship. They're not just names. They are keys or codes to unlock special signals or special segments of DNA. Scientifically, we know that when DNA hears certain sounds, it starts to open up certain hidden segments. The first research that was done on that was done in Russia. And they found that whenever certain sounds were played in the presence of DNA solutions, specific regions of DNA would start to replicate that would just normally sit there. Another prayer that has a hidden technique or hidden energy behind it, when you combine it with solar techniques, is called the Usnisa, Vijaya, Dharani. It too is an ancient prayer used in ceremonies. To the masses, it's a prayer for service and ceremony. To the elite, it was a link to consciousness in the stars and to the sun itself. This is the Anabacoa. Now, we have this listed on our website, and almost daily, we get people asking, well, what does it mean? And then we give them the meaning, and they say, well, that's just a song. That's just a prayer. We heard this, if a person is Jewish. We used to sing this when I was a child. You probably did. But what they didn't tell you is that each of these letters in this prayer is a code. It allows the user to learn the 42-letter name of God as a song. These 42 letters constitute the name of God. Now, when we say the name of God, what we're referring to is a very powerful creative force. Each of these lines has a specific connection to the universe. And it's the way ancient people preserved a knowledge that they found thousands of years ago. They discovered that if you say, for instance, this line, you could cure cancer. You could cure certain diseases. If you understood what this word meant. If you understood what this word meant, actually this one, no, the third one rather, it connects you with prosperity. It connects you with the blocks, well, removing the blocks that normally keep us poor and afraid and in fear and anxiety and doubt. There's another line, I believe it's this line, that helps to connect us with a certain type of spiritual power called clairvoyance. The very last line helps cleanse the soul gem. It helps cleanse the negative energy that builds up in the soul. In this time period, the ancient Egyptians didn't allow worship of the Creator. So the worship had to be hidden in this name. Also, when you say this particular word, when you say it properly while looking at the sun, certain changes happen in your brain frequencies. Your brain does really strange things. It starts to make patterns that you don't see in any other time periods. It starts to almost connect with the energy from the sun in a way that you can't do normally. The words of power for healing, we've had a number of people report to us that just by playing this, we've had people that had arthritis and a number of different health conditions improve just by listening to these words. These are, again, words that emanate from the stars and the sun itself. Holy men and shaman and other people that are able to elevate their consciousness and listen are able to take these words and transmit them in oral form to the masses. But they are used in a certain way. And we're going to talk about some of the techniques that you can use with these particular words. And we have a CD that's entitled The Words of Power for Healing that has all of this. They discovered that the words are transmitted in a code, and that in their normal form, the words are locked. Very much like what happens in DNA. In its normal form, DNA isn't just normally open. There are certain segments that are locked and certain segments that are open. So it's almost as though that these words are intelligent. They know how to open up certain segments of DNA if used properly. There are also words associated with prosperity. Prosperity is an energy, just like healing. A person can be ill in the energy of prosperity, and that causes poverty. It causes chaos. It causes bankruptcy. The illness of poverty is an illness that translates into loss of abundance. It's more than just losing your job. It's more than just losing a relationship. It's more than just not being able to heal yourself financially. It's an illness that affects your DNA. So that if you don't know that, you can go from job to job. You can go from investment to investment. But the investments and the jobs never quite let you become at the state of wealth that you wish to have. Because what you're not doing is you're not addressing the illness in your DNA that's keeping you stuck, that's keeping you in the same place. And one of the main things that we do in my work is help people understand your relationship to the universe is as important to your wealth as the job that you work. So that if you have a relationship with the universe that is negative, or that is doubtful, or that is fear-based, no matter how much you invest, no matter how much you work to save, eventually that energy is going to outstrip the energy that the universe is trying to give you. So we work with people on helping to understand that your connection in consciousness to the universe is like having money in the bank. And when you fix that illness that prevents that consciousness from being healthy, then your prosperity can heal itself in the same way that a cut can heal itself, in the same way that going to a good counselor can heal a relationship. Especially in these times where prosperity is something that we kind of look at and say, well, we're going through a down cycle. The earth can get sick as well. We can accept this type of sickness in our consciousness, but we don't necessarily have to accept it if we understand that there are ways that the Creator has given us already to deal with it. Another way that He's given us to deal with it, and we'll talk about some of the ways we can use sunlight with this, is this powerful prayer that I've discovered called the Usnisa, Vijaya, Dharani. On our website, we call that the prayer of greater miracles. This is a prayer that really is more than a prayer. It allows the particles of blessing that come into the universe to preferentially be absorbed into the body and into the mind. It changes the reality of the user with repeated use. The ancients say it was given to us by a very powerful being called the Medicine Buddha. It's an ancient prayer. We know from science that if you meditate or say certain prayers on a regular basis, it can help your T cells, which are cells that help with infection, increase. It can change your blood pressure. It can change your heart rate and slow it down and make it more healthy. It can change your metabolism, decrease your blood sugar, just praying. It can change your brain waves in your EEG so that it becomes less likely to have epileptic seizures. Just praying. Now, how does a prayer do that? As children and as young adults, we weren't taught that prayer could change your body. We weren't taught that people having someone pray for them that they didn't know would decrease the amount of time they would be in the hospital. We weren't taught that a prayer can improve a person's stock portfolio. We weren't taught that prayer could shorten the length of a hospital stay or could affect the course of a battle. We weren't taught that. Because what we weren't taught about prayer is it's an exercise in consciousness. They're not just words. The consciousness that we evoke during prayer changes the reality around us by changing the magnetic field that we generate from the body. That field, that energy, affects reality in many ways that we just don't fully understand. The conscious mind says, it doesn't do that. Don't worry about it, just throw it away. But when you see it work, the conscious mind is quiet and says, I don't understand. It's just a fluke. It's just a miracle. This is the prayer. I'll give you 10 seconds to memorize it. 5, 4, 2, 1. This prayer is in ancient Sanskrit. And it's one of the prayers that I use almost daily. It's a prayer that encodes an energy that allows change in the environment. How many people heard me go over this last year? A few, okay. We have a lot of slides because otherwise I would go over it this time. You want me to go over it? Yes. The translation for this prayer is 7 pages long. Sanskrit is a mother tongue. So for instance, one word like, let's see, really long one. Adistista nanistista has almost a 4-line translation for it. So let me go over it slowly. Because when I went over it last time and I looked at the DVD, I said that way too fast. So let's go over it slowly. Namo Bhagavate, Trilokya, Pradavisistaya, Buddhaya, Bhagavate, Tadayatha, Om. Visudeya, Visudeya, Asama Sama, Samatavabasa, Sparana, Katigahana, Sabhava Bisude, Abhisankatu Mam. Sugata, Vadavakana, Amirta, Abhisankai, Mahamantra Padai. See, I'm speeding up. Sorry. Ahara, Ahara, Ayu Sam Dharani. Sodahaya, Sodahaya, Gagana Visude, Usnisa Vijaya Visuddhi, Sahasrasmi. Samkodite, Sarva, Tathagata, Avalokani, Sat Paramita, Padapurani, Sarva Tathagata, Mati Dasabhuma, Pratistite. Sarva Tathagata Hridaya, this is the 10-cent word. Adistita Nanistita, Mahamudres, Vajrakaya. Samatana Visuddhi, Sarva Varana, Arpara Dagati, Padavisuddhi. Prati Nivartaya Ayusuddhi, Samaya Adistite. Mani Mani Mahamani Tatata Bhutakoti Padisuddhi, Vishbhuta Buddhisuddhi. Jaya Jaya Vijaya Vijaya, Smara Smara Sarva Buddha, Adistite Suddhi. Vajri Vajragarbe Vajam Bhavatu Mama Sariram. Sarva Satvanam Kakaya Paradavasuddhi, Sarvagati Paradavasuddhi. Sarva Tathagata Sinkame Samaspasayantu, Sarva Tathagata Samaspasa Adistite. Buddhaya Buddhaya Vibudaya Vibudaya, Bodhaya Bodhaya Vibudaya Vibudaya, Samanta Parasuddhi. Sarva Tathagata Hridaya, Adistita Nanistita Mahamudre Svaha. Now, when ancient scribes used to say this prayer, they would sit in a cave and look at the sun for weeks at a time, or sometimes months at a time. When they looked at the sun and said this prayer, they used a special mirror. When they said this prayer looking at the mirror, looking at the sun through the mirror, they said that the gods themselves would descend to earth and visit them. There was a DVD made by a company in India where a demonstration was given of a special cave that you can still go to in India, where you're taught to say a prayer like this, and the god Shiva himself will come to visit you and instruct you. One of my great friends, who is also a great adept and teacher, Siva Baba, Dattatreya Siva Baba. How many people have heard of him? Nobody? Okay. He's a lot more popular in India than he is here. He visits this cave every year, and Shiva himself comes down to earth every year to visit him. Now, Shiva Baba is famous because he remembers who his last incarnation was. His body gives off light. Sometimes when he takes photographs, you can see 2 of him in the photograph. Not double exposure, 2 people. Sometimes you can see light coming out of his hands or coming out of his eyes or coming out of his head. In part because he uses energies in this prayer and from the sun to help evolve himself. In ancient cultures, they believed that every cell in the body had a dual nature, that the cells were made of energy, and at the same time they were made of matter. The matter part of the cell needed to be fed by food, by the matter that we eat that we call a meal. But that the energy part of the cell, in order to waken up the hidden nature of the cell, also needed to be fed. That energetic food was just as necessary for a full human life, so that instead of dying in 70, 80 years, we live to be 300 or 400 years or older. The combination of both of these help to awaken both the mortal and the immortal nature of the cell. In order to fully assimilate the light that comes from the sun, we have to first take in mana. And to trap this power in the cells, you need to know how to do it. Sunlight, before you take it in, has to be treated. Now, sunlight that we take in from, let's say, the sunrise or the sunset is one of the cleanest forms of sun energy we can take in. But when the sun hits the atmosphere or the magnetic field around the earth, it changes from its normal right-handed spin to a left-handed spin. Now, why is this important? When you take organic chemistry in college or in medical school, one thing you learn is that 90% of the proteins in the body have a left-handed spin, which means that if you have a solution of protein, you shine light through it, the light is then shifted to the left. Well, proteins that have a left-handed spin are a lot less stable than proteins that have a right-handed spin of light. So that the sunlight that creates cells in our solar system, in our planet, tends to create unstable left-handed cells, which have a shorter lifespan and are not as stable. If you use certain mirrors, it changes the spin of sunlight back to right-handed. And so that right-handed sun helps you build stronger, more resilient, less prone to damage proteins and molecules and DNA structures inside the body. In particular, obsidian and gold and quartz were important for this. If you have a polarized mirror that is a parabolic golden mirror, and you look at the sunlight through that, it shifts the angle of incidence to the right. So a parabolic golden mirror. You can find those at Edmund Scientific. The parabolic mirror is the one that has the indentation like this. It's a very slight indentation. You can't see it to the naked eye, but it's a parabolic golden mirror that you can find at Edmund Scientific. Tell them Dr. Gibson sent you. The other thing that you can use is an obsidian pyramid or an obsidian mirror, either one. Now, why do we need to use these substances? So one basic technique that I'm going to give you involves looking at the sunrise while repeating the Anabacoa and angling the golden mirror in such a way that you can see the sun in the mirror while you repeat the prayer. You should do this for no more than 5 to 10 minutes. Also, in order to trap the solar energy in your cells, it's important to take in colloids or rare earth elements. For beginning students, we always start with 2 elements, gold and platinum. There's another company that I recommend called Purist Colloids. Purist Colloids. P is in Paul, U-R-E-S-T, C-O-L-L-O-I-D-S. PuristColloids.com. You're going to look for colloidal gold and colloidal platinum. Now, the instructions on the bottle are misleading. They say take a tablespoon twice a day. That's too much for solar work. You're going to take 1 drop of each. Let me repeat that. The instructions on the bottle are misleading. They say take far too much for solar work. You only need 1 drop of each. Yes?
How many ppm?
I think these are 10 parts per million. I can't hear you.
You say twice a day?
Once a day. 1 drop of each. Let me repeat that one final time. You're going to take 1 drop of the colloidal gold, 1 drop of the colloidal platinum per day. Now, some of you are going to find that when you start looking at the sun in this way, you're going to be sensitive to solar energy in the same way that you would be sensitive to a medication. And so you're going to have to dilute the colloidal solution. You usually will dilute it by putting 1 drop of the solution in 1 cup of pure water, or water from your well. And then you take 1 drop out of that. That's for people that are sensitive. How do you know that you're sensitive? Well, if you start to look at the sun, sometimes you'll get headaches. Sometimes you'll feel energy building up in your system, in particular in your groin area and your solar plexus. Your solar plexus is a huge battery for sunlight. It's one of the main areas in your body that stores solar energy. If you start to feel pressure there, you're a sensitive. So you need to back off on your colloids. Dilute it in 1 cup of water and take 1 drop out of that. You don't increase the dose, just 1 drop out of that dilution. So you wouldn't take it twice a day. Still would be 1 drop. When you start to do this, you're going to notice certain changes in your body. You notice that your body will start to feel warmer. Physically warmer. That's the first thing some people notice. You'll also notice that when you look at the sun is going to look different to you. It's going to look bigger. It's also going to look as though it's oscillating back and forth, because that's what it's doing. And in the oscillation, you're going to see this disk moving back and forth like this, but in half of the oscillation, the sun is going to look dark. In the other half of the oscillation, it's going to look like this. Why do you think that is? Kind of like the yin and yang symbol. The other thing you're going to notice before we answer that question, the oscillation will be timed to the frequency of your heartbeat. So as your heart beats, the sun is going to move back and forth like this in rhythm with it. It's strange at first until you get used to it. So why do you think it does that? What is that phenomenon? Yes?
Because that's the time when you're actually in and out of reality here. This time here.
That's warm. Anybody else want to try it? I'll give you a hint. It has to do with resonance. Resonance. Yes.
My opinion is that there is an acceleration of frequency within the viewer as well as that which is viewed.
That's right. Very good. There's an acceleration of your consciousness that allows you to see the phenomenon of resonance in the sun as it creates your heartbeat. You can't stop your heartbeat on your own. You can't stop your breathing on your own. The sun is the source of all life, not just physically, but also in the most intrinsic, the most intimate manner you can think of. It's where your heartbeat comes from. It's where your brain frequency comes from. If you tried to, you couldn't stop your breathing any more than most people for a few minutes. Something impels you to breathe. Something impels you to think. Something compels your breathing and your heartbeat to be synchronized. There's a rhythm between the two that we know nothing about consciously. The ancients teach that that comes from the sun. When you increase your intake of sunlight, something happens to your heartbeat and to your breathing. They slow down, especially your heartbeat. Most people's heartbeat will go down about 15 to 20%. Why do you think that is? Exactly. The answer was, sunlight is boosting your energy, so your heart doesn't have to work as hard. The ancients, one of my great teachers, Jean Savoy, his heartbeat was 30 beats per minute. So whenever you sat with him, you looked at him and you noticed he wasn't breathing very much. And I believed him when he said his heartbeat wasn't very fast. My heartbeat is around 58 to 60 beats, roughly. I've been taking in sunlight about maybe 20 years altogether. Many ancient cultures understood that sunlight was a source of energy and that it helped our natures wake up, so to speak. Let's go to the next one. There are certain types of sunlight that we need to talk about that are called solar enhancements. These enhancements help the body change and evolve. The type of sunlight that most of us are familiar with, let's call that raw sunlight. That's just sunlight you look at and you walk outside, and whether it's cloudy or not, you can get that anytime. Most of us hardly ever take in polarized sunlight. That sunlight reflected through a polarizing mirror. That's one of the most powerful forms of energy you can take into your body. Much more powerful than any type of food you can eat, any drug you can take. It's because the sunlight is filtered for right-handed spin. In many ancient tombs, we've discovered gold filters, gold mirrors, obsidian mirrors, and many different types of crystals associated with these mirrors. And many archaeologists thought that they were primitive forms of worship of the sun, animistic worship, so to speak. They felt that the sun was just an object that they gave these sacrifices to. We know now that they weren't so primitive. Color filters. There are colors in the body that we need just as much as we need food. If you notice, if you look in this room, there's almost a rainbow of different colors that we have on. It's because the body needs color. There are certain types of color that come out of the sun that if you filter sunlight for that color, it decreases your need for food, and it also stabilizes your psychological makeup. With my advanced students, it's one of the first things they learn with sunlight, how to use specific colors with the sun, in particular, orange and red. They're the color filters that we work with first in the advanced lessons. Now, if you combine certain crystals with sunlight, you can also get out another different type of very positive energy from the sun. If you bounce the energy of the sun off a gold parabolic mirror onto an emerald and then into your eyes, so if you imagine that this is the mirror and you hold the emerald over it and bounce the light off of it and then look at it, there's an energy that you can get from that that increases your power to heal yourself and others. But it has to be bounced off the golden mirror, off the emerald, and then into your eyes. That increases your healing energy. If you use a ruby, and it can be an artificial emerald or an artificial ruby, it doesn't matter. If you use a ruby, it enhances your life force. One of the things that ages us as we go through life is we lose life energy like we lose energy from a battery. Taking a golden mirror, reflecting the light of that sun off the golden mirror onto a ruby, and then looking at the sunlight in the ruby enhances your life force, like plugging yourself into a battery. If you say the Anabacoa, or the Usnisa while doing that, it enhances the process. Let me repeat that. You take the mirror, bounce the sun off of it, take the emerald, bounce the reflected sun onto the emerald or the ruby, and look at it. The animal core increases your healing power. It also increases your life force. The Usnisa increases your life force and your healing power, but it also increases your clairvoyant perceptions. It makes your mind expand, and it also makes your dreams almost in this very vivid technicolor. It's best said from memory if you do this, but you can also read it. The most powerful times to do this are at sunrise and sunset. At sunrise, you have about a 15 to 20 minute window. You have the same window at sunset. So when the sun goes up above the horizon, more than 20 minutes, it's too late. You've missed that window. About 15 to 20 minutes before the sun sets is a perfect window for doing this exercise. When you do these exercises properly, there are certain factors you can take from the sun. And we talked about some of them yesterday. By using the ruby, you take in the energetic factors into your body in the same way that a plant can. You enhance your life force, you lower your blood pressure, you lower your heart rate, you lower your oxygen need in the body. When you use the emerald, it increases the evolutionary factor. It increases your brain's ability to evolve. It starts to wake your brain up. In order to hold on to this energy, it's important to keep using the platinum group elements. If you don't use them in conjunction with the sunlight, your body doesn't digest and assimilate this energy. It just loses it. This is one element that I recommend, and it's the original formulation of the Egyptian mufkusti, the exact same formula. It has palladium, platinum, rhodium, and iridium in it. They recommend a dose of 1 teaspoon. The dose that I recommend is 1 drop. Let me repeat that. On the bottle, it says 1 teaspoon. For solar work, we're recommending 1 drop. So this bottle will last you the rest of your life. Keep it refrigerated. And when you taste it, it kind of tastes like bread and water. So this word actually means the bread of life. 1 drop, not 1 teaspoon per day. I'll wait a second, Larry, about to get that email, that website.
On the DVD, are we going to pick up that, where we can order that?
The website is Priestess Alchemy.
What was that?
Priestess Alchemy is the website. Can you see it at the bottom here? It's www.priestess, Priestess, alchemy, alchemy.com. And look for Zenergy, Zenergy. I don't work for them, I don't get a cut. No, either or. 1 drop of this or 1 drop of this, not both. Yes. Daily. Okay, the question was, when will you see a result? Most people will start to see a result within 4 to 6 weeks. That's for most people. But let's hold a few of our questions until we get to the end, okay? No, I don't get anything from this. Yes? Okay. Now, the important thing about using the colloids is understanding that the sun has both constructive energy and destructive energy inside of it. The constructive energy, we call it sephirotic energy. The energy of the Sephiroth are the particles of blessing that we talked about yesterday. Most of us store or not store these particles depending on our genetic makeup. That can be altered by learning to take in sunlight properly. Taking in sunlight in the presence of a substance like this helps you store more of the good energy from the sun. In large amounts. When used in conjunction with the proper prayers, that accelerates and accentuates the amount of positive energy you take in. You then become a conscious resonance or resonator with the sun. We can skip that one. Now, another thing that we teach in this course are called the Primordial Movements. Once you start taking in sunlight into the body, it starts to build up pretty quickly. And what a lot of people don't realize is that some of the ancient movements of Tai Chi and martial arts were derived from early forms of what we call primordial movements, which were movements designed to circulate the energy from the universe that comes into the body through the sun more efficiently. The primordial breath is a certain type of breathing that you also learn to help move the energy from your solar plexus and from your first and second chakra areas into the rest of the body. Primordial breathing, or the primordial breath, is a special type of breathing that will slow down not only your heart rate, but also your respiratory rate, how often you breathe. It helps you take in this energy more efficiently. The breath of fire helps your body assimilate and metabolize the energy from the sun more efficiently. All of these we teach in that course, and each one of these will take us 20 minutes, so I won't go over these for now. But I will show you what the primordial movements look like. Primordial movements are what we call sacred postures, and they are usually postures that are done immediately after you take in sunlight. It's a bit like stretching after a good meal. They open up the energy channels in the body, and they allow sunlight to penetrate into the organs and the bones and the muscles. It also increases the power of the positive energy factors that come into the body, and they only require a few minutes a day, and they should be done immediately after your solar practice, and it's given as part of the course. This is what they look like. Actually, this is the long form. This is the short form. The long form is associated with the full advanced use of solar energy. This is what beginners start with. And in using these postures, you find that sunlight doesn't give you a headache. It doesn't cause you to feel overly amped up. And it causes you to be able to feel younger, more supple, more energetic. And these are the basic movements, and there are 12 of them altogether. And this is given as part of the course. If I go back for a second, the more advanced movements, such as this set, each one of these sets of movements give rise to what we call the primordial fetus, which is in the middle right here. The secret of taking in sunlight is not just to feel better and not just to slow down your aging. But sunlight has the capacity to fertilize the cells in your body. There's a cell that each one of us has inside the body. That exists right behind the navel. That cell is called the primordium. Primordium. The primordium is the first cell that comprises who you are. When the male sperm and the female egg get together, they make a cell. That cell divides over and over and over, and it gets to be 6 feet tall and 215 pounds. That would be me. But that initial cell still exists inside of the body at the end of your navel, and it's called the primordium, and it just sits there in most people. It's the cell through which we get the initial information about who we are. When you start to take in sunlight, one of the first things that happens is that cell starts to get energy. And in Taoism, that cell becomes what they call, when you take in sunlight right, the primordial fetus or the immortal fetus. When you combine sunlight with colloidal elements, with the energy of that initial cell, its divine purpose is not only to give rise to your physical body, but it can also give rise to your energetic body. So that as you take in sunlight over time, that energetic body grows. And over time, it becomes a separate entity from your physical body. You can actually see it. And over a period of 7 years, if you feed it right, take in enough sunlight, get enough rest, and take Geritol, you develop a separate vehicle for your consciousness that doesn't die. That's why it's called the immortal fetus. These exercises are designed to circulate energy into this area. Let's talk about the use of solar filters. This part of you, this immortal fetus, not only helps the physical body feel better and become younger and more intelligent, but it can also expand your consciousness. Solar filters are a way to help your body and your primordial body take in energy from the sun and feed the intelligence of the sun selectively into different parts of your being. These filters filter certain intelligent factors from the sun into your brain. The brain is bombarded by millions of these factors. When you look at the sun, you can imagine how much energy can be stored in one fiber optic cable. And you can send light through. You can send millions of phone calls through one cable. We also know now that the sun generates information through its light. But there are certain filters that if you embed them in optically pure quartz, can take out certain energies from the sun. So for instance, if you embedded this image inside of an emerald, that can be done, by the way. And then you reflected the image of the sun off of that emerald from the golden mirror, you will then increase the amount of healing energy you have in your body many-fold just from using a plain emerald. This is called the solar cross filter. you can laser embed this filter inside of an emerald. Then you can filter the sunlight on the emerald and get the energy from the solar cross into your body. You can also put this on just a piece of clear quartz. Now, we've also found some of these in ancient temples. We don't know how they got images like this on quartz. But ancient people were a lot smarter than we gave them credit for. The energy that you absorb from this symbol is called the energy of the X factor, which is a very advanced sort of healing energy that you can get. This is one called the B factor. Again, the central image is this healing talisman in the middle. These are protective symbols that keep negative factors from polluting the central image. And these are also further protective images around it. This one comes in clear quartz. Again, you would reflect the image of the sun in this area. It will fill up this area. And it will allow your body to preferentially take in very powerful energy that helps slow down your aging process and gives a very special type of food to your growing immortal form called the B factor. I think that's kind of neat.
Can you buy these? Can you get it somewhere?
That's a good question. We've never actually offered them, but I can be persuaded if a person's suitably motivated and willing to work. Once you start taking in sunlight from this, the changes occur a lot more rapidly. So I'd have to see a person be sufficiently motivated with the basic exercises before they start using these. This is another filter given by a being by the name of Gabriel. This is called the Gabriel filter. Ancient people used to call the intelligences they contacted through the sun angels. These are real beings. They're not always just fluffy beings with wings. The Gabriel stone is a stone that is very good for not only increasing your healing energy, but also contacting this being in particular. When you use a Gabriel stone, and you use it right over a period of time, taking in sunlight, it changes your brain frequency so you can see this being more easily. If you just use the stone and don't take in sunlight, the being can come to you and you won't see him, even though the being will be standing right beside you. Proper use of the Gabriel filter helps you see and communicate with the being much more efficiently. It causes the resonance in your brain to increase so that the being will appear to you as a real solid person. This one is the Michael filter. Has anybody ever seen this image before? It's kind of a rare image. This is the sigil that the Archangel Michael gave for contacting him. He gave it to the Catholic Church about 1,000 years ago. When you use it properly in solar techniques, the sun will fill up this central image. The energy will be transmitted into your brain. You should use the Michael image with a ruby and the golden filter. But if anyone is interested in one, let me know and we'll work on getting you one.
What does it say in Hebrew?
These are the names of the patriarchs.
On
The-
the top?
This part,
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Well, it's Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Shati,
So they're names of the patriarchs.
and it says it all on the side.
So they're the names of the patriarchs. Okay. This is the Uriel filter. Has anyone heard of the Archangel Uriel? Okay. This is again a way that the Archangel gave us that allows us to help contact that energy. Raphael gave us this particular sigil. I think we offer these and we call them primordial stones. They're one of my favorite things to use when I look at the sun. Now, this is one of my absolute favorite ones. This is a filter that allows you to see and project your consciousness into a world called Gandin. Gandin is a primordial world. It's a real place. It is a place, when you look at the sun and you focus the sun's image on this area, you will see a being appear to you. It'll look like a large butterfly or an angel. And the being will transfer your consciousness into this world called Gandin. Gandin is one of the most popular of the Buddhist primordial worlds. There are a number of temples named Gandin. There are a number of incenses named Gandin. It's one of the places, the Buddhist heavens, that if you learn certain prayers and do certain mantras, your soul is likely to be able to transmit after your death. And this is called the Gandin filter. Again, this is a way that you can use the sun as a way of transmitting your consciousness beyond the sun into other worlds. The gate between this world and the other worlds that exist outside of this plane of reality can be approached through the sun. This filter is one of the ancient ways that Tibetan Buddhist monks and Tibetan shamans and adepts used to be able to transmit their consciousness to different places. In using primordial energy, there are certain practices that you have to do. The most important is using words of power. Also using rare earth elements. Also learning to use the primordial movements and solar filters. Combining all of these together helps the body begin to evolve and grow beyond just the basic human form. Solar practices are something that most people never hear about. The information that I'm giving you now used to be transmitted under threat of death. In many cultures, if a person who wasn't part of nobility or the priestly class, if they told the emperor or the people in charge that they knew how to do this, they were killed. The Usnisa, Vijaya, Dharani, and other mantras were only given to the emperor and the highest ruling class. If you learned them and talked about them, you were killed. Because they felt that the nobility and the priestly class are the only people worthy of understanding this. I'd like to think that we live in a more enlightened age. That there are certain things that we can learn without threat of death. But I think that there is a disease in our culture that is, I think, probably more deadly than the threat of death, and I think that's apathy. That we can learn things like this, and then we'll put it away. We'll come to a conference, we'll get lots of books, we'll meet lots of really nice people, and then we'll learn something that you won't hear very often in a lifetime. And then we'll ignore it. Or we'll say that's not possible. And the negative forces love that about us. They love the fact that you can teach a person, a human, anything. But because of our lower nature, we tend to ignore everything that doesn't have the most elaborate bells and whistles behind it. I would ask that each of you at least look at this, because this is rare. This is something that if you use it right, will expand your consciousness in ways that I can't even tell you about. It will expand your consciousness in ways that will make enlightenment something possible in this lifetime. You will interact with beings from other dimensions that will make it seem like you're living in a science fiction movie. And I don't say that lightly. And being a psychiatrist, I know the difference. At least I'd like to think I do. Let's take a few more minutes and we'll stop with this question about the Tao. In the universe, and I just want to leave this as food for thought, there's only one creator, an infinite being with no beginning and no end. And imagine that your soul is this point of light in the middle, and that the universe revolves around you. Then the Creator wills himself into form, creating what we know as the known universe. And we are still at the center of that universe. According to the Tao, the energy that the universe is created from is called primordial energy. It's the energy that we are all made from. It's the energy that comes into the universe every minute, every second, every hour of every day, and reinforces our being. But at the core of that energy is the Creator inside of us. According to this theory of the Tao, there are 5 different primordial elements that each of us is made of. And each of these elements is how the Creator divides himself in reality to make things. Each of these elements has a name: primordial fire, primordial earth, primordial water, primordial air, and primordial ether. Each of these elements has a definite function inside the body. In the primordial form, they are the basis for all creation. Everything that exists comes into existence through this primordial energy. These elements joined together and created the first soul. And the first soul in the universe, you can call it the Tao. You can call it the source. But it's the soul that each one of us comes from. So in ancient teachings, they teach that this individual, this early soul, this first primordial soul, transmits itself through the universe, through these elements, in the form of these cosmic particles that reinforces the being of each one of us. So that in a way, we constantly repeat the process of creation by taking in sunlight. The art of sunlight then becomes a sacred ritual by which you regenerate yourself, by reconnecting with this individual soul. There are specific exercises to help you take in primordial fire, to help you take in primordial earth and primordial water, primordial air, primordial ether, that strengthen different aspects of your being. This is part of a 2-day course that I teach, but I wanted to put this up for a reason. It shows that the soul is a complex of energies that constantly reinforces itself and recharges itself from the energy of the universe. And this energy is not something we have to simply be unconscious to. It's something that we can take conscious part in if we learn to consciously connect with the energy of the sun itself. So we'll stop right here and take a few questions, because I have 300 more slides after this. So we could go on for a while, but we don't have time.
Thank you again for an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. The prayers that you had written up there, do you have those available on your website in that written form?
Yes, they're on our website, both of them.
And what is your
all of them.
website?
Let me put that up for you. It's tybro.com.
Can you get the prayers wrong? Like, there's so many unusual words. I mean, no, if you mispronounce it, does it create anything
Yeah, if you
negative?
get it wrong, you get an F on the test.
No, I'm just saying there's so many, unusual ways, that I'm just concerned about that.
The prayer actually is an intelligent energy force.
Okay.
Your intent in saying the prayer is much more important than your pronunciation.
Okay, fine. That's all I need to know.
If your intent is clear, your pronunciation will be clearer.
Okay. You mentioned using color. can you use, how do you use the color other than the stones? Is there like
Color filter, you
filters?
can use a cellophane
Just-
filter.
Okay,
Orange, I mean, you can buy cellophane filters of different
Okay.
colors.
Do you recommend any kind of diet when you do these prayers with the sun
That's
in
an
them?
excellent question. Let's talk about diet for a minute. Yes, I do. There are certain types of food that make it difficult for your body to absorb sunlight. They also make it difficult for your body to retain sunlight once you absorb it. And these are foods that are high in what we call negative spiritual energy or detritus, pork being number one. Pork sets up a very high negative resonance inside your cells that makes your cells reject sunlight or solar energy. Shellfish is another. Also asparagus. I know. I asked the same question when my teacher told me that. I asked the same question. Why asparagus? Why not spinach or broccoli or something? Why asparagus? I could see beets or something, prunes, but asparagus. And he said because it has a similar energy resonance to pork in the plant world. And when you take in a lot of asparagus and you smell your urine, it smells like rotten meat. So I didn't argue with them after that. Also, it's important to decrease your intake of red meat to no more than once or twice a month. Red meat makes it hard for your body to assimilate energy. It lowers your vibration. So your body has to work harder when you take in red meat than you do when you don't take in red meat. Other than that, you're free to eat what you like. Smoking is not good. Drinking too much is not good. Psychedelic drugs, I would say, used with extreme caution. Other than that, eat what your body craves. You'll find that the more sunlight you take in, the less food you will crave. And you will also crave certain types of vegetables and meat more. For some reason, you tend to crave lamb. I don't know why. Yes.
Is gazing directly at the sun a useful practice after sunrise and before sunset?
If you gaze at the sun when the rays are not harsh, it's a useful practice. It's much more useful, however, to use a golden mirror while looking at the reflected sun, because just naked sun is left-handed spin and not nearly as proficient for assimilation as right-handed spin with the golden mirror. But just naked sunlight by itself, you're only going to absorb just a small percentage of that. Your body will take it in much more efficiently with the mirror at sunrise or at sunset. Yes.
I have a question
Yes.
about these rare earth elements you recommend, gold and platinum. I was wondering, are these naturally occurring elements in the body throughout every cell? Or do you really have to, get it through your, digesting it?
You can find these elements in every cell in the body, but it's such a small amount that it doesn't do what we need it to do.
Okay.
Now, these elements are not naturally occurring on Earth. None of the elements that we have on Earth came from Earth. Did everybody know that? Where do they come from? They come from stars, that's right. The Earth in and of itself, the elements that we have here, all came from a star. Because when large stars explode, stars are the factory for heavy elements. The planet Earth was created as a condensation of elements that came out of a star. So what you're doing by placing these elements into your body is you're recreating alchemically the factory that first began inside of a star.
Gotcha. One other thing, follow up on that. What relationship does melanin have with the sun and impacting this process of raising your consciousness?
Well, melanin makes it easier to store sunlight in the skin and in the body. The more you have, the more you can store in the skin. That's why when you go into a tanning booth and your skin changes, it's because the skin cells take in sunlight, they're transformed, the melanin allows them to store some of that energy in the form of colored pigment. That's what a tan is.
Is this process just specific to vision, or does it work with the blind? Is it good just on the skin?
Well, the optic tract is one of the few tracts in the body that go directly to the brain without an intermediate nervous relay. You take in sunlight through the eyes. It's a direct path from solar consciousness to the brain without having to go through intermediaries. Now, there are techniques that allow you to take in sunlight in the dark. There's yeah, I said that right. There are certain places, mostly in the East, where you can go and you can live in a cave. And they teach you how to take in starlight from the universe in a cave, in the dark. And you can pay to stay there for a month. And they teach you certain postures and certain techniques and certain visualizations and how you can use those visualizations to take in energy. Because one thing we have to remember, primordial energy penetrates into the earth for several miles. It doesn't just stop at the surface. So there are certain areas in the world where this energy is concentrated. Santa Fe is one of them. Sedona, Arizona is one of them. The Himalayas are one of them. There are certain places in the world where this cosmic energy has been known for centuries to be concentrated in a very high charge. So there are certain sacred areas in those spaces where you can go and take in that energy much more easily than other places in the world. So you can take it in whether you're blind, whether you have vision, depending on which techniques you use. Yes?
Will this energy in Tibet change the Chinese in any way that would easier and better on the Tibetans?
Can we get that on tape?
Could you repeat that so we can get it on the DVD?
Would this energy in Tibet make any changes in the Chinese people that might make them ease up on the Tibetans?
There's a story there. There are certain Tibetan monks that work with left-handed energy. They worked with, and some of you probably already know this, they worked with the Nazis to help bring about World War II. They also worked with the Chinese to help bring about the overthrow of the Tibetan government. When Berlin was overthrown, they found hundreds of these monks who had been killed, lying all around Tibet, and all around Berlin. And so there are certain powers at work in the world that want Tibet the way it is. And there are certain powers that are working to change it. So the hope is that it would change. But there's two sides to that war. I'll leave it at that. Yes. Can we use the? Yes.
I have a few. When you're using
One.
Okay, when you're doing sun gazing, say with stones, yes, and you have yet to memorize the miracle prayer, is it going to be as effective to listen to it rather than trying to read it as you're gazing?
It's better to recite it as you're gazing.
Okay, even if you're going to look. Okay, I'll save
It's
the
better to
rest.
recite it.
Okay, thank you.
All the mantras work much more efficiently if you recite it rather than just reading them, meaning recite it from memory. We have one question, yes.
What's the difference between ormus and the colloidal or the Zenergy?
Well, ormus, does everybody know what ormus is? You want to tell us what ormus is? I could tell you, but let me have somebody else talk. There are certain types of elements or substances that, it's complicated. that really don't exist in what we call normal physics. They have a configuration that allows them to create certain patterns of energy in the body. And ORMUS is a long acronym for a special type of substance that was discovered, I believe it was in Arizona, in a field in Arizona. And it's also now been created in certain laboratories. It's a type of substance that has similar patterns of energy to mufkusti or the white powder. They're similar products, but not exactly the same. And the theory behind ORMUS is that it has an effect that allows the body to take in superconductive elements and store cosmic energy in the same way that you would with colloids. I do not recommend ORMUS, in part because there's really no way to control for quality or who created it or exactly what you're talking about when you say I'm taking ORMUS versus I'm taking a colloid. But when you're taking colloidal platinum or colloidal gold, you know you're dealing with the colloid, you know you're dealing with the substance. And from my own experiments with ORMUS, it just doesn't work the same. It just doesn't. So that's why I always recommend the colloids, in particular colloidal platinum, colloidal gold, 1 drop of each, not 1 teaspoon, 1 drop.
Yes, and of the people that have gone through your class, have they changed their lives? What are they doing now? Is there a pattern to it, or are they still going back to the office?
Yes. In other words, do they chop wood and carry water afterwards? One of our students has generated an immortal fetus in a body of light. I didn't think you heard me when I said that. One of our students has generated an immortal fetus and a body of light. A number of our students have begun the process of outer enlightenment. In some cases, they start to give off light themselves. They've seen their heart rates go down, they've seen their health improve, they've seen a number of really phenomenal changes. About 15 of our students have interacted with solar beings and have been able to transmit their consciousness into the sun.
Thank you again for your work. And I was wondering what the further implications were for this between the primordial healing and the cellular enhancement. Like, are we also just doing this for our own personal benefit, or are we also at the same time healing our culture, all of us in our petri dish of the earth?
It's an excellent question. What are the further implications? The first time anybody ever asked me that. Let me give you a diagram. That's an enlightened question. When one person begins to take in sunlight, are we out of time? Okay. I'll make this the last question and then we'll stop. When one person begins to take in sunlight, the body begins to expand as far as the energy around it. The body begins to, the aura gets bigger, a number of things change about that person. That person then makes it more possible for other people to have the same process happen. They form a community so that one aura catalyzes the effect on another aura, making it less difficult for a person to become enlightened. Each time somebody enlightens and changes their aura, it makes it easier for the next person to do it, and the next person. And eventually, the community becomes the planet. And if 1% of the population becomes enlightened, then the entire world becomes spontaneously enlightened. That's why that's an enlightened question. Okay, we'll stop. Okay.
Everyone's fighting, okay. I do have a question for you. Yesterday, I believe you mentioned a Nobel Prize award-winning
For Victor
scientist.
Hess in 1936.
Could you say that again?
Victor Hess in 1936 for discovering this radiation.
And which publication of yours has that information?
I have a book called The Human Body of Light, which is going to come out next week. It has a lot of this information in it, including this diagram. Okay, we'll stop here.